Hey everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK. We're playing Universes Beyond decks with a $100 budget, not including the commander. Chris built Godzilla, so basically his creatures' toughness is equal to their power. He'll make good use of high-powered but fragile creatures. Scott's BlanKa deck is all about cantrips and spell slinging to pump up BlanKa, dealing tons of damage to his opponents. Kyle brought Slicer, Hired Muscle. He's leaning into the Voltron equipment plan while taking advantage of a bunch of goad effects. Then I'm playing Dhalsim, Pliable Pacifist. I'm looking to get underneath bigger creatures on the battlefield and then pump up my team at instant speed. Please subscribe if you haven't already, it really helps us out, and stick around for an appearance from my fat cat Meatball. He's so chunky. Chris won the die roll, and he played a forest before passing to Scott, who also plays a forest, and passes to Kyle, who plays Dwarven Ruins. This thing can tap for red, or be sacked to add 2 red. What? I also play a forest before passing back to Chris. On turn 2, he plays a mountain into Goblin Anarchomancer, reducing the costs of his future red or green spells. On Scott's turn, he plays a mountain as well, because he's a copycat, and then he passes back to Kyle, who draws and also plays a mountain as his land, and then he casts Kedis, Emberclaw Familiar. So now if Slicer attacks an opponent, the other opponents take some damage as well. Rude. Onto my turn, I play another forest and cast Assault Formation. So now all of my small power, big toughness creatures will deal damage equal to their toughness. On Chris's turn, he plays a forest, and then casts Triumph of Ferocity, getting some card draw engine underway. Before passing back to Scott, he plays Cinderglade, which enters the battlefield untapped, and then he casts Domri, Anarch of Bolas, pumping up his creatures and generating some manas. So he'll activate Domri's +1 ability before passing the turn to Kyle, because he didn't have anything to do with that manas. On Kyle's turn, he misses a land drop, but he decides to activate his Dwarven Ruins, so he'll generate 2 mana by sacrificing it and going all in on casting his commander by using its more than meets the eye ability to cast Slicer, High Speed Antagonist. So he's a hasty threat that could eventually be passed around to other players and goaded.
So then...
Well, he has Living Weapon as well, so he's technically an artifact.
Living Metal.
Sure.
Oh, keep up, Scott.
Come on, dude. Chris, Slicer, High Speed Antagonist.
Oh, he's the antagonist of this story?
But he's an Autobot.
He's got plot armor.
No.
He's a 3/2?
He's a bad guy with first strike.
Wait, what?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, but he's gonna convert.
Well, yeah, then we get to hear that over.
So Kyle sends Slicer, High Speed Antagonist at Chris, who takes his beats, and then Kedis will trigger, dealing 3 damage to both Scott and myself. After that, Slicer will convert to Hired Muscle, and then on my turn, on my upkeep, Kyle gives me Slicer, Hired Muscle. So he's goaded and can't be sacrificed, so I'll definitely be attacking an opponent with it. I play Overgrown Farmland as my land for turn, and then I'll cast Atzocan Archer. Atzocan? Atzocan? I'm not sure. When that enters the battlefield, I have it fight Kedis, killing Kedis dead. I don't want Kyle to get his way. Following that, I'll move into the red zone with Slicer. I'll have him punch Scott in the face, and because of Assault Formation, Slicer is effectively a 4/4 double strike. At the end of my turn, Slicer goes back to Kyle, and then on Chris's upkeep, Kyle gives Slicer to Chris. That's how that works. Triumph of Ferocity will also draw Chris an extra card, and then he casts Spellbreaker Behemoth. Following that, he'll have to attack with Slicer. He aims Slicer at Domri. Come to find out you can't do that. Goaded creatures must attack a player. So the good news here is it did not impact the outcome of the game, and we learned something today. So Chris ended his turn, Slicer went back to Kyle, and Scott's upkeep, he got Slicer. As payback for the, albeit erroneous, death of Domri, Scott attacks Chris, dropping him to 31. He then casts Hull Breach. So he chooses the 3rd mode to destroy a target artifact and an enchantment. So Slicer gets popped and my Assault Formation hits the bin, which makes me very sad and angry at Scott. Not really, I'm not very competitive ever since the incident. Scott then casts Light Up the Stage, revealing a Game Trail and a sweet Oil Slick Mountain. He can play them until the end of his next turn, so he plays a Cinderglade. And then he passes the turn over to Kyle. He unfortunately misses another land drop, but casts Pyrite Spellbomb, because that's all he could do. Sorry, Kyle. On my turn, I play Canopy Vista, entering the battlefield untapped. Then I cast my commander, Dhalsim, Pliable Pacifist. I gotta tell you, this guy's pretty cool. So I moved to combat with my 1/4 reach guy. Because he's got reach, Dhalsim is like, yo, untap yourself. Scott takes his single point of damage, and then Dhalsim says I could draw a card. So I did. On Chris's turn, he draws 2 cards, and then he plays a Gruul Guildgate before casting Fires of Yavimaya. All of his things are now hasty threats, and he could pump one of them up if he sacks it. which I don't think he would. He picks on Kyle, kicking him while he's down, but he had the highest life total. On Scott's turn, he plays that sweet oil slick mountain as his land for turn before casting BlanKa, Ferocious Friend. He's a hasty threat that will most of the time have trample. He'll likely throw around some non-combat damage and get +2/+2 when he's targeted. That's a lot of words. Scott also attacks Kyle before passing. Kyle found a land, yay! Then he casts Ornithopter of Paradise with it, getting even more mana production. He passes the turn over to me, I play a Forest, and then I move into combat, attacking both Chris and Scott. Dhalsim then says, yo, untap, Reachy boys. Chris and Scott take their damage, and then I get to draw 2 whole cards from that. I like drawing cards. And I think this deck lives in the second main phase. I cast Decanter of Endless Water. I normally don't care about not having a max hand size, but there's a few cards in this deck that care about that. I cast Twin Silk Spider, a 1/2 Reacher that makes a 1/2 Reacher. My deck is like secretly Spider Tribal. On to Chris's turn, he gets to draw 2 cards. He plays a Mountain before casting Colossal Majesty. So now, in theory, he'll start drawing even more cards on his upkeep. He casts Elemental Bond, and guess what? That says he can draw a card when he plays something of power 3 or greater. This dude's gonna draw all the cards. He passes the turn over to Scott. Scott plays another Oil Slick Phyrexian land, I think that's a forest. Then he casts Spider Umbra, which will be targeting BlanKa. This triggers BlanKa, giving him +2/+2, and having his opponents each take 2 points of damage. Now BlanKa's got +1/+1 from the Spider Umbra, and Reach, and Totem Armor. He casts Ardent Elementalist, and when it ETBs, he'll bring back Light Up the Stage to his hand, which he then immediately plays because he has Spectacle. And so again, he can exile the top 2 cards of his library and play them up until the end of his next turn. He finds a 2-handed axe and a Faithless Looting. And following that, he decides to punish Chris by attacking him with BlanKa. So Chris will drop down to 20 life. And then Scott passes the turn back over to Kyle. He draws and finds another mountain as his land. Then he casts
Unexpected Windfall.
Yo, that was so unexpected.
Discarding Slow Bad.
So he'll generate 2 treasures, and he'll get to draw 2 cards, which is not nothing. Before passing the turn over to me, I play another Forest, and then I move into combat, attacking each one of my opponents with a Reachy Boy. So Dhalsim, again, untaps all of them. They take their damage, and then I get to draw a card for each opponent that I dealt damage to. I cast Arasta of the Endless Web, Spider Tribal. And with Arasta out, I'm hoping that my opponents cast a whole bunch of instants and sorceries. I follow that up by casting Mirror Entity, one of my win conditions. I pass the turn over to Chris. He draws all of the cards, thanks to his enchantments. Then he casts Archetype of Aggression. So all of his things have trample, and none of our things can have trample. He gets to draw another card, thanks to Elemental Bond, before dropping Rogue's Passage on the battlefield. He casts Ghalta, Primal Hunger, for 2 mana, drawing another card. Thanks to his Fires of Yavimaya, Ghalta has haste, and he punishes Scott, smashing Ghalta into him for 12 points of damage, dropping him down to 14.
Slicer's not good on this board.
No.
Because you guys can just, I don't know, block it.
Repeatedly.
Yeah. So that
But it's 6 damage.
I won't block it.
that's
Draw
cool.
for turn.
I don't believe you.
On Scott's turn, he drew, and then he casts Faithless Looting from exile. This triggers my Arasta, giving me another 1/2 Reachy Boy. Then Scott is able to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. A pair of lands hits his bin before he casts Bothersome Quasit. So importantly, whenever he casts non-creature spells, he can start goading his opponent's creatures, which is not nothing. So with that on the stack, Chris decides to cast Ram Through, targeting Ghalta to fight BlanKa. This gets me another 1/2 Spider with Reach, and it also triggers BlanKa, so he will get +2/+2, as well as deal 2 points of damage to each one of Scott's opponents. Ram Through will then resolve, so Ghalta fights BlanKa, destroying the totem armor of Spider Umbra. Ram Through also pretends to have a version of Trample by dealing the excess damage to Scott's face. Scott then casts Sweeping Cleave, the adventure mode of 2-handed axe. So I get another 1/2 with Reach. Ghalta gets goaded. BlanKa gets +2/+2 and deals 2 points of damage to each one of us. 2-handed axe goes on an adventure, and then Scott casts Blazing Shoal, again getting me a 1/2 with Reach, as well as goading Chris's Spellbreaker Behemoth. This will also again pump up BlanKa, as well as deal 2 points of damage to each one of Scott's opponents. And with that, he'll move into combat. He decides to try to put Kyle out of his misery by attacking him with a double strikey big old boy. Kyle does what he can by casting Galvanic Blast at Scott's Bothersome Quasit, killing it dead. And then he'll activate his Pyrite Spell Bomb, killing Scott's Ardent Elementalist. Combat damage will resolve, and this knocks Kyle out of the game. Sorry, Kyle. That was a sweet showing of Slicer early on, though. Then it's my turn.
So everything
That's a
becomes
good reference.
+7/+7, and then you guys just both die.
Huh? I was about to say, yeah, you could kill him because he's tapped out
I just
easily.
I just got both of you.
Because everything becomes 7/7. You have 6 1/1s that become 7/7s.
Yeah.
So that's 13 damage right there. That kills him, and then everything else would come at me.
What? How is...
Yeah, math.
So what? 6/7/7
Yeah.
is 13 damage.
Yeah,
So
no.
6.
I said it, but that's wrong. But keep going.
Goes at Chris, and these guys goes at Scott.
Well, seeing as nobody dealt with my mirror entity, I wonder if they forgot it was there. I move into combat, Dhalsim untaps my guys, and then I activate mirror entity, giving them all base power and toughness 7/7, and deal 13 points of damage to each one of them. Am I right, Chris? Just kidding, buddy. Hey, that means I won, yay! As promised, here's Meatball. He's so chunky. And there you have it, that's the game. So making a budget deck with these Universes Beyond cards was super fun for all of us. We had a blast playing this game. Please let us know what you thought about the game in the comments, and as always, thank you for watching.